What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We've got Jake Paul, 3 wins, 0 losses, taking on Tyron Woodley, the former UFC welterweight in MMA. Welterweight is 170 pound champion with 4 successful title defenses. He had an MMA career of 19 wins, 7 losses, and 1 draw. Does not have a professional boxing fight at this point. Now, going in, we know the narrative. We've got Jake Paul, the problem child, YouTuber turned professional boxer, although he has yet to fight a professional boxer. Thus far, he's taken on fellow YouTuber Anason Gibb, former NBA, multiple-time slam dunk contest winner, super athlete, but notoriously undersized for the NBA, Nate Robinson, and then most recently, Jake Paul fought Ben Askren, the former Bellator and ONE champion, never a UFC champion, but he had won MMA championships in multiple organizations. However, he wasn't much of a striker. He was a former All-American champion level wrestler turned MMA fighter. Never really fully developed the hand game though, Ben Askren. So you've got YouTuber, NBA player, MMA fighter, but not striker. Now he's taking on Tyron Woodley, again, a former welterweight champion in the UFC, coming off a 4-fight losing streak that basically got him out of the UFC. He was champion after beating Robbie Lawler in July 2016. Beautiful performance. He actually stopped Robbie Lawler via KO. Tyron Woodley's dangerous. Even though Tyron Woodley's background is that of a wrestler, he is a very dynamic striker by MMA standards. So after Woodley captured the title against Robbie Lawler in 2016, he defended it 4 times. Once in a draw with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, they ran it back, and then they fought to a Woodley decision win in the rematch, and then he defended it 2 times more successfully, once against Damian Maia, where he won via decision, but was injured in the process, which is why Woodley couldn't really put his foot on the gas against Maia, and then he beat Darren Till via Darce choke-like submission, but that was after dropping Darren Till. This was one of Woodley's best career performances. His last successful title defense against Darren Till, who was coming on a wave of hype, looking really good against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, a Cowboy Cerrone, and then Woodley shut all that down, dropping Darren Till with a pull counter. And then after beating Darren Till, he loses the title to Kamaru Usman, who's still the current champ in the UFC in the welterweight division. And then after losing to Kamaru Usman, Woodley, and that was a decision loss, 5-round decision, although Kamaru dominated that fight, won every round against Woodley. Then Woodley lost against Gilbert Burns, where he got dominated again throughout 5 rounds against Burns. And then Woodley got stopped in the 5th round via rib injury TKO against Colby Covington in another fight that Colby Covington was just dominating. And then most recently against Vicente Luque, this time Woodley got submitted, but after getting dropped and rocked and just wobbled in the stand-up game repeatedly. So on this 4-fight losing streak, you can't really even find a round that Tyron Woodley wins, which that coupled with Woodley being 39 years old really has you wondering where he is in terms of ability and performance heading into this fight with a very amateur, even though he's fighting professionally against non-boxers, but somebody who is been boxing, spending his time training boxing, getting better over the past 2 to 3 years. And I do believe that Jake Paul has been taking boxing religiously. I mean, he's obviously been putting in the work, and he seems to really love what he's doing right now, to the point where I'd venture to say he's doing a lot more boxing than anything that he was doing prior on the YouTube side. I mean, I know that he's been a notorious troll, and he's largely stuck with that, got your hat, and in several other cases, but it seems like Jake Paul's main love right now looks like it's the sport of boxing. I'm convinced at this point, even if he's not fighting professional boxers yet. So given where he is, fighting a Tyron Woodley right now does seem to be the next logical step to test your boxing acumen. You're fighting a non-boxer, but at least this MMA fighter is boxing proficient. very good. I mean, again, he dropped Darren Till with the pull counter right hand. I mean, this guy knocked out Robbie Lawler, a puncher, devastating striker himself, knocked out Lawler for the title. Went a total of 10 rounds against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who, if nothing else, is a striker, a karate-style striker. So this obviously isn't boxing, but this is a very interesting matchup. And, you know, you look at the size dimension. This is going to be fought at about like 190 pounds-ish. So Woodley's going to have to fight at a higher weight class than he's been fighting in MMA his whole career. And yes, he's been a pretty big welterweight, but welterweight has suited Woodley. We never saw Woodley go to middleweight, 185. So I don't think it's optimal. And Woodley's not a super tall guy. He's about 5'9". So there's not a whole lot more filling out he could do. And he's already got wide shoulders and a lot of muscle. So you don't want to pack on too much more on top of that without reducing some of your speed and agility. You know, Jake Paul, on the other hand, is 6'1". So we've got 6'1" versus 5'9". And then Jake Paul has a 76-inch reach to Tyron Woodley's 74-inch reach. They're both orthodox. We don't have any southpaws in this one. I see, you know, Woodley spent some time in the gym with Floyd Mayweather and others and has really just been working on his game. I really question, one, where Woodley's confidence level is in being able to pull the trigger. Because here's the thing, in Woodley's 4-fight losing streak, he lost the first, well, the Usman one aside, because Usman fought Usman's style of fight at the time. This is before Usman was working with Trevor Whitman, developing or further developing his striking game. So Usman basically mauled Woodley, just outworked him over the course of 5 rounds. So there wasn't really too much of a chance for Woodley to like let his hands go in the center of the ring. You know, a striking battle between Usman and Woodley didn't really occur. Usman backed Woodley up into the cage and then kind of grappled him, controlled him, and beat him up. But the 2 fights after that, now we're talking Gilbert Burns and Colby Covington. Colby Covington's a wrestler. Those ones were more a case of Woodley being unable to pull the trigger like he used to. And a part of me wondered, is it because, you know, Gilbert Burns is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu expert specialist and Colby Covington is an outstanding wrestler, MMA style wrestler as well. He does that MMA style of wrestling great, even though he was an actual collegiate wrestler. Maybe these were things that would make a Tyron Woodley apprehensive to let his hands go out of fear of the takedown and then just getting your gas tank drained. What if I miss? And then he takes me down, shoots the leg and gets me on my side, and I don't want to have to go through that nightmare again. So you could almost have plausible deniability in terms of why Woodley's not letting his punches go. Whereas, you know, against Darren Till's a Muay Thai guy, Robbie Lawler's a heavy-handed guy, and so these guys weren't guys who were going to take you down and control you. Woodley knew that he had the luxury of keeping it in the stand-up, which allowed him to, again, kind of be patient, step back, look for your opportunities, and explode. That's the kind of fighter that Woodley is. Patient fighter. He doesn't let his hands go a lot. He's never been a volume guy. He'll step back, kind of slip, and wait for his time to either do a pull counter or to ambush with 2 or 3 or 4 punches, just fast punches, because Woodley does have that special athletic looking hand speed where you see him let 1 or 2 punches go. You're like, God damn, like it looks pretty special. Go rewatch Woodley versus Darren Till and Woodley versus Robbie Lawler. But whereas in the fights against Gilbert Burns and Colby Covington, Woodley's lack of volume or extreme apprehension in throwing his punches, because again, never been high volume, but this was even ×2. This was a much less voluminous Tyron Woodley. So he was losing every round of those 2 fights, but then against Luque, it almost looked like he had a do or die mentality, like I just got to put my foot on the gas, and in doing so, he basically sacrificed a lot of the stand-up defense that he used to exhibit. Woodley doesn't get pasted a lot with a ton of punches because he is so cagey, likes to move around the cage and then just ambush in certain, he likes to dictate the terms of the exchange. So against Luque, he kind of threw his own defensive playbook out the window, said, hey, I haven't been throwing enough strikes in these last couple fights, let me just get to work. And in doing so, yes, it was a fun few minutes, and he did hit Luque a couple times, but Luque ended up dropping him, and yes, it was a submission, but it was because Woodley was nearly knocked out on his feet by the time he was submitted. Like, Woodley was looking like he was in survival mode, barely keep my eyes open and stay lucid mode for the last couple minutes of that fight versus Luque. So he was really looking in bad shape, and that was the last last fight that he's coming off of before getting into his first boxing fight, I don't know how to feel about that. Now, again, he's not fighting Canelo Alvarez here. He's fighting Jake Paul. So you would think that in Woodley's prime, he should have little trouble beating a Jake Paul because he is the special athlete out of the two. He's the one who was, had a greater, Logan Paul, Jake's brother, I know did some wrestling in high school, maybe college, played some high school football. So these are like decent athletes. And, Jake Paul is obviously not a physical pushover. He's 6'1", 6'2", athletic, strong, obviously hits pretty damn hard. I mean, he put freaking Ben Askren's lights out. Robbie Lawler didn't put Ben Askren's lights out. And you can see that, Jake Paul is really hurting these guys that he's fighting right now, even though, again, they're not professional boxers. And in the case of Anderson Gibb and Nate Robinson, his first two opponents, they're not even professional fighters. Tyron Woodley has fought them all, the Rory McDonalds and the Kamaru Usmans in MMA, right? So he's, been in the trenches. We haven't seen Jake Paul get out of the first round. I don't think Anderson Gibb took him out of the first round. But wait, Nate Robinson actually did. He got dropped in the first round, but he somehow made it to the second and got finished in the second round. So we haven't seen Jake Paul in the deep waters yet. And this is supposed to be, what, an 8-rounder? So there's, if Tyron Woodley doesn't get smoked in the first or second round, which I really don't expect him to, then we're going to see Jake Paul having to reserve his gas tank, just operate behind the jab. He's been smoking these, Ben Askren's so quickly, we haven't even seen him in these less than fresh situations. Whereas, again, we've seen Tyron Woodley fight Stephen Wonderboy Thompson 5-round distances twice. So what do I expect to see now with Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley? First of all, Jake Paul is looking to set up that devastating right hand. I'm sure he's got other punches, and in interviews, he's been saying, I want to get pushed beyond the first and second round so I can show you guys what I've really been working on. But, it sounds great. We have to, obviously see it. Whereas we know what we've got with, we know what we had with Woodley. We don't know what we have as a boxer, and I don't think you could change the fundamentals from MMA to boxing overnight or even in one camp. So I know Woodley's been working, but what's going to work against him, I believe here, is one, Jake Paul is a naturally bigger guy. I think Woodley might still have the hand speed advantage, might even be the harder puncher. It's tough to tell. We don't know, but I know Woodley has knocked out a lot of MMA fighters, and I know Jake Paul has smoked a lot of non-stand-up professional specialists. So I don't know what to say in terms of who's got the power advantage here. You would think Woodley's been doing more punching, but it's tough to tell. I think Woodley might have the hand speed advantage. What I don't know that Woodley has, but should still have, he should still have the gas tank just because he's a professional athlete who's been fighting. And lately has been fighting some pretty long and grueling fights, although he hasn't had much activity or success to show for it as of late. But we've seen him in the dark waters several times. So I expect Paul to be the more fundamentally sound boxer. Like if they were to both go into a boxing gym right now and exhibit the fundamentals, work the certain bags, and do the different things that boxers do day in and day out, Jake Paul's been doing this for a few years now. Woodley has always messed around with it, but no, he's in a transition right now, trying to make this his primary skill set and be able to compete in a real situation. So yes, he is the one who's been in the devastating fights against, world-class level fighters with a ton of heart and guts. And any true fighter will tell you that's really where you know what you're made of when you're in those types of fights. And that's the difference between somebody who's a talented dude and a bona fide fighter, is what you do when plan A, plan B don't work. So we'll have to see what Jake Paul does. What I think he'll do is operate behind the jab, stay patient, keep his defensive construct, move around the ring, try to control distance against the shorter Woodley, and just stay busy with the jab and know, or at least rely on the fact that Woodley is not going to outpace you. I don't think he's going to out-volume you. He's gonna ambush, throwing 2 or 3 punches at a time, maybe 1 punch at a time in some cases. He's going to be looking to ambush and set up shots. The problem with that is when the fight slows down and you have what online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer calls the slow rounds, basically the ones where nobody's getting dropped or seriously hurt, or there's not even a ton of entertaining activity when it's just kind of a sweet science type of round where the guys are just kind of circling, they're taking pictures essentially or posing for pictures, and then, you know, just throwing, you know, a jab at a time, moving. I think that Jake Paul will be better than Woodley in those situations. And again, if the ambushes don't work and then Tyron Woodley is in the, you know, starting to get in the later rounds, he'll still have only those big shots in those ambushes to rely upon to win rounds or to score knockdowns, whereas Jake Paul, I think, has more path to victory. I think he can potentially stop Woodley, but I think he can also win rounds against Woodley. I think Woodley to win rounds against Jake has to hurt Jake. I don't think he's going to like win a jab battle against Jake, which, man, that sounds kind of crazy because only one of these guys has been fighting for the past 15 years, and it's not Jake. But I think that Jake will be able to win the slower rounds, and I think that Jake Paul will blast Woodley a few times, and I think Woodley will have his moments. I think Jake will be surprised and get caught by Woodley's speed a couple times. I don't know if it's going to be enough to drop and stop Jake, though. So if Jake's able to kind of clear his head and get his wherewithal back and kind of stay composed, again, we haven't seen Jake Paul really get smashed, blasted, and tested where any of these questions have been answered, but we'll see what happens when Jake Paul, you know, gets his nose busted up, you know, and if he can respond somewhat responsibly as a fighter would and keep his fundamental construct intact, I do think that he could beat Woodley and win via decision. I'm going to give Woodley his due and enough credit and enough respect to say I don't think Jake Paul will finish Woodley. Woodley's got a lot of heart. He's got a lot of pride. He's got a ton of experience, at least, you know, in the trenches, non-boxing, but in the trenches experience with having to do it all. Punch, kick, hold, survive, ground and pound, preserve your energy when you can't just put the guy away. He's had to deal with all these situations. So I think that Woodley, because he's so low volume, is going to lose rounds to Jake Paul, but survive the fight. And Jake Paul, I think, is going to take this one via decision. But please, yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section. This is kind of an interesting matchup. Good matchmaking here. Again, the next logical step for Jake Paul is a fighter like Tyron Woodley, who's a much better striker, obviously, than a Ben Askren. And then for Tyron Woodley, I'm just glad that he's going to see this type of money because, you know, it's more and more information is coming out over the past several years on the fighter pay in MMA and in the UFC. So the fact that Woodley's going to be receiving this type of money, I think is so well deserved given his very renowned and, you know, world championship winning MMA career. But please, yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. And by the way, I think this is an 8-rounder. I've got Jake Paul winning like 6 rounds to 2, maybe 5 rounds to 3. But I think the scorecards are going to look something like that. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.